Good afternoon and welcome to our September 3rd Tuesday at 3 webcast series event. Today we'll be talking about managed cloud services, and our hope is to provide a good primer so folks understand what it is we mean when we talk about managed cloud services in general, and specifically those that we offer here at Cumulus Global. My name's Alan Falcon. I'm the CEO and pragmatic evangelist here at Cumulus Global, and I want to welcome you here this afternoon. Always appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and week to move forward. And a couple of logistical things before we get into the content here today. As you note, the audio is muted, prevents any background noise from getting in the way of our session here. So at any time during the session, if you have any questions or comments, along the top or right-hand side of your screen, there's an icon. One of them opens the questions window. It's the best way to let me know you've got a question or a comment. I can respond in line, or we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And it lets me track to make sure we get all of those questions answered before we wrap up here this afternoon. We'll generally, just as a heads up, the session is being recorded. It generally gets posted within 24 hours up on our website, so feel free to share the link. We'll send you an email once it's posted. You can share that with coworkers, acquaintances, folks who you think might find it valuable. Note that we generally will stop the session before the Q&A portion at the end, just as we find it flows better for those of you who are attending or doing this webcast on demand. A quick reminder that on our website, we've got tons of great resources. Beyond our blog, we've got a library of ebooks and white papers. In addition to this third Tuesday at 3 webcast series, we have our occasional Coffee and Cloud series. Those webcasts are generally shorter, 15 to 20 minutes, plus a little bit of Q&A on very specific, timely topics. We've got a current set of timely topics up there right now. And if you attend a Coffee and Cloud series event live or watch on demand, you have the option of requesting either a Starbucks or a Dunkin' card. We'll happy to send you a card and get that your coffee covered for you. So thanks for joining us here today, and let's dive right in. And before we just jump forward to managed cloud services, it's important to get a sense of the evolution of IT services and how companies like ourselves and others have responded and evolved over time as well. And really, it's an evolution that started with IT, particularly for small, mid-sized businesses, is my focus here, being in a break-fix model. Then came the advent and popularity of service contracts, which had a natural evolution as IT matured into managed services, and eventually now where we are today, where we're promoting sort of on the leading edge of managed cloud services. And so we look at those traditional IT services. This is actually a diagram that I used in part to explain the difference between on-premise and cloud back in 2009 and 2010. And I pulled it out of the archive because, we're sort of in the Wayback Machine here. And where, traditional IT services were all about having IT, secure at a physical location within your office. You had a computer room, maybe a closet or an office. Sometimes you had a full data center, depending on how large your business was. And that's where your computing systems were. And everything was pretty hardware centric, right? You had multiple servers, which over time evolved into virtual servers much later on, but you had these physical boxes and devices, many single points of failure as far as servers, switches, power supplies, generally behind a single firewall to protect you from the physical outside world. And your employees, the people who use these computer services, tend to be tied to one or more PCs or laptops. And this was a time when most people still had a desktop computer at their desktop, and if they needed to go mobile, they had a second computer that was a laptop. We weren't as ubiquitous with laptops, notebooks, things of that nature as we are today. It's important to understand this because this really sets the stage for IT services and how they evolved. And in that traditional IT model, there was remote and mobile computing. It was secure, and in part because it connected to your physically secure computing equipment at your business, but it was inefficient because the methods of connection had a lot of overhead and a lot of cost associated to it. So it was also very expensive, not just in the software you needed, but in supporting hardware and even networking equipment you might need. And it added an incredibly high amount of administrative and support complexity. And so what we had is an environment where, you might have your domain controller and a backup domain controller, a file server, an email server, another server or an appliance for backing up. And then you might need an application server to run an application, and a separate server to be a database server. And all that was physical. And so there was a lot of need to manage physical resources. If you had mobile computers, you would add terminal servers, additional media servers, access points, and SSL VPNs. Again, all hardware. A lot of things that had to be managed. And so IT, services really responded to that environment and really bringing, capabilities that at the time were corporate into small, mid-sized businesses with a reactive-based service. Hey, you buy it from us, we'll install it for you, and if and when something goes wrong, we'll respond and fix it. And in that regard, there wasn't as much thought about standardization. And when I refer to standardization here today, I'm talking about on the part of the service provider, right? Where if, a company said, gee, we're going to go with XYZ, we're going to go with brand X servers, the service provider would say, go buy them, or we'll sell them to you. A next company might say, we're going to go with brand Z, and the service provider would say, fine. And so you might also have a company who've bought their IT through a number of providers over time, who hires an IT service provider for their break fix, and that provider had no control over what was purchased and when. The other element of the break fix is the vast majority of problem response had to be on site. And even though there was remote access capabilities, the fact that it was expensive and cumbersome made it somewhat impractical. It was also at a part where technology and the use of technology for many businesses was relatively new. And so the physical presence of a technician who might go into the server room and do some updates and come out and walk through or down the office line or through the cubicle area and help people with questions that they have that weren't urgent, or maybe they've been waiting for help, was a model that was effective. But as small, mid-sized companies started to get a little more sophisticated and started to bring some technology expertise in-house, either by assigning responsibility of technology to the CFO, or maybe hiring one technology-centric person to do user support or be a network administrator, still using outside services, right? You ended up having, sort of an extension of break fix, play on words here, break fix with benefits with service contracts. And typically what service contracts would do would add, in addition to that break fix, if something goes wrong, we'll come out and fix it and we'll bill you for the time it takes, was adding scheduled periods of on-site support management administration. So, hey, you'll have a help desk, you call, we'll help people over the phone, we'll send people there in an emergency, but twice a week we'll have someone on site for half a day. And during that half a day, they'll solve problems that weren't urgent. They'll do server updates, they'll do desktop updates, they'll answer questions, they'll provide a little one-on-one training. It provides a consistency of care. And part of the pitch from service providers is, look, you don't need to hire a full-time IT person. We can have someone on there a half day, up to full-time if you needed it, but we also have these other resources off-site for helping users and addressing problems. Still reactive in nature for the most part. But an aspect of these service contracts sort of shed the light on the future in that it often aligned with vendor service contracts. So a company would buy, a new, Windows NT server or Novell NetWare server. I'm dating myself now. And with that, they might upgrade some PCs. The vendor comes in, installs them. There's a 1-year warranty on that equipment. They sell a 1-year service contract. They buy a backup appliance that comes in with 1 year of software updates as an add-on. They put a phone switch in. It comes with 1 year of maintenance and support and updates as well. And so the whole concept of service contracts started to align IT service providers with their vendors and the businesses. And that alignment with vendor service contracts both served the client really well because it made things affordable and made sense to do things, larger projects with more impact. But it also, set the stage for more predictable costs. And it also started to guide IT providers into narrowing the number of options they'd support. And that becomes more important as we evolve forward. And oftentimes the fee structure for this will break fix is time and materials, or maybe you prepay a block of hours. With service contracts, you started to see a monthly or an annual fee as a fixed price for a fixed set of services, plus any time and materials response that's necessary and project fees. And what started to happen is over time, the service contracts started not just mirroring the vendor service contracts, but starting to include more services that the IT company, the IT service provider was offering. So it would start to include that, it would include tier 1 and tier 2 help desk, not just tier 1. It would include, monthly application of Windows updates automatically. So that wouldn't be a T&M type of activity. And so the scope of service contracts, little by little over time, grew, which fit the natural evolution into managed services. And when we look at managed services, excuse me, sorry about the cough there, we see how it then evolved. So we had really a drive to efficiency. And this was a drive to efficiency by the IT service providers as the market was getting more competitive, and more folks were entering the industry and businesses had more choices. And so where the service contract might say, gee, we'll give you a help desk and we'll come apply those updates, with managed services, the shift became we're going to become more proactive. So we're going to remotely monitor your servers and your workstations. We'll remotely manage them. So we'll put in tools that let us test and distribute the updates without having to come on site. We'll have technology in place that lets us add users, as well as provide even, quote unquote, desk side style support remotely. And with that, and we started seeing IT service providers standardizing on specific products and services. And so it's not uncommon, even today, when you look at a lot of IT companies on their website, they'll say, ooh, we're a proud Dell partner, or we offer, we do HP servers and workstations, and we partner with, Meraki and XYZ company for switches, right? And part of what that enabled IT service providers to do was increase the depth of their expertise, because their technicians, their architects, their support people wouldn't need to know a little bit about everything. They could learn a lot more and be more in-depth and more capable in fewer things. And so it created an increased efficiency, which lowered the cost of service, which made it more competitive and more affordable. The other big shift with managed services is the majority of response is now remote, right? Where the goal is for efficiency to do as much as we can over the phone or remotely, so we're not spending time driving and you're not waiting for someone to be able to drive to your facility to get a problem resolved. Even so, with managed services, the focus remains on infrastructure. We're still talking about, in fact, most managed service contracts were written to say, here's your cost per thing, right? Your cost per server, your cost per firewall or switch, your cost per PC or laptop, right? And the focus remains on how do we keep the hardware running smoothly? How do we make sure the operating system's performing well and is secure? How do we make sure the applications or the services like, a database engine are sitting on top of those and running and reliable? All of those things require maintenance, and the majority of the time was there. How do I install applications? Excellent. The user has a problem with an application, not really within our range of service. Talk to the application vendor about that. Now we're talking about evolving into managed cloud services. And just like service contracts were time and materials with benefits, managed cloud services are managed services with benefits. Why? The nature of cloud, right? So because in a cloud environment, right, and I look at a company, historically in a Windows environment, and I'll use a Microsoft ecosystem as an example here, you'll have a primary domain controller as a separate machine. Your backup domain controller may also be your file server. You'd have a Microsoft Exchange server, and you'd have a SQL server running your database and your applications. Small environment for physical pieces of hardware. So your managed service provider's focus would be, oh, I've got 4 machines. I need to keep them up and running. I need to make sure the operating systems are patched and secure. I need to do the updates and make sure they don't break anything. But also things like, ooh, I need to make sure that my exchange queues aren't getting too large because that could hurt performance or cause Exchange to stop functioning. Ooh, I need to make sure that the SQL Server database is being properly backed up and that the traffic queues and the disk I/O queues aren't too long, and that we're properly allocating memory and disk space for caching and for indexing. Right, a lot of maintenance at the infrastructure layer that keeps the services and systems running, but isn't really at a higher level than that. With the cloud, right, it's a different environment. I've got my workstation. So yes, I need my operating system running. I need those updates. I need to make sure I don't run out of disk space, etc. on my laptop. But now my laptop connects to the cloud. And Microsoft is running the file services. My Drive and SharePoint file services are managed. The space allocation is managed. The efficiency of those systems is managed by Microsoft. I moved, Exchanges Online as part of Microsoft 365. I don't need to manage queues and disk space. That's done for me. If I migrate from a SQL Server to Azure SQL Services, there's still maintenance and work, but it's not at the hardware and system level, right? I'm not necessarily mapping, mapping queues to drives and managing capacity in the same way that I am if it's a physical server. And that focus changes the value proposition when you get into managed cloud services in a couple of ways. Financially, you're turning capital expenditure into operating expense that scales up or down with your business. And it really shifts those IT services from that infrastructure level higher up or closer to revenue, as you will, to the applications, the data, and the process that you use to run your business. And in doing so, by moving closer to the business goals and objectives, it's easier and to plan services and solutions that provide business results. And it's easier to increase the value of the investment and the expenditure of your IT services because you're not keeping the water running, right? You are adding value and improving the way you interact with your customers, how efficient your employees can be, the processes, how they can access and use their data. And so when we look at that and we go forward, there's an economics of managed services as well, right? And so we'll start looking at those managed service models. And the two aspects of it are the operational and the fee structure, right? So operational, as we talked about, it's outsourced IT services. Good managed service providers will limit 2 to 3 options for each type of technology. So you may only have one choice of server, but you might have two brands of desktops and laptops. You might have 2 choices for switches, 2 for firewalls, 3 for backup services. The majority of their response and service is remote. And the model intends to manage costs for the service provider and therefore to you as the customer by driving efficiency. So that standardization, that remote lets them leverage their resources much more effectively. Like the fee structure, you tend to have 3 types of fees. You have a set monthly fee, you have hardware and software costs that you may be paying directly or going through the service provider, and then you have fees related to projects, right? And so the balance, and we'll get into it, what comes in those monthly fees? Well, typically it's monitoring of the environment, management and administration of the environment, system support, supporting the devices and the core system software and the core systems, and end user support. That is at a high level is what goes in the monthly fees. As we'll see in a moment, what's actually in those fees can vary greatly by multiple managed service providers, all offering different styles or flexibility or range of managed services. And today with managed service providers, given the way hardware is sold now, many will simply guide customers and have them purchase the hardware. Some will do it as a procurement service. Same thing for software. And you still end up having project fees. You have project fees for new deployments, for upgrades, and for certain services that are by definition outside of what's covered under your monthly fee structure. And so we talk about monthly fees. Most managed service providers are still billing based on things, right? We're going to charge you so much money per month for a server. And there we'll monitor and manage the hardware, the operating system, the updates, and the system level security. So much money per month per system. So you have 2 SQL servers, you're paying 2 times X dollars a month, and we'll make sure they're up and running, and that the queues are managed and they're being backed up. Same thing with certain applications. We're going to pay so much money per network component. A firewall is X dollars a month, the router is Y, switches are Z, access points or something else. Same thing at the workstation. And some MSPs also charge on a per user basis, right? And oftentimes, whether they're charging per user or workstation, it's really one and the same. They're covering the hardware, the software, the security of the OS, the updates, as well as the help desk for the human being. Now, some MSPs may also include in their fixed price application support, asset management services, change management, a range of other services that they include. Quarterly, quarterly business reviews for CIO strategy and planning. They might help you draft or provide basic policies and procedures. They might do your procurement for you, and they may offer some customized reporting options that they build in beyond standard ticket reports and performance reports. And again, here's where it can really vary. And so not all managed services are created equal, right? And these are actually anonymously pulled graphics of what 3 different companies located across the US see is their managed service and what's included, right? And so you can see that there's some difference in what's included, what's not included as far as it. So when you compare managed service providers and you look at your monthly cost, you're really looking at lifting the hood and saying, well, what's included, what am I getting for those dollars, and how are they billing me? And so here's an example that we pulled off in sort of a range. In our area of the country here in New England, remote management, monitoring and management, or RMM of a server, runs $400 to $600 per server per month. To do system software administration for SQL Server or certain applications can be anywhere from $250 to $1,500 a month. There's a wide range there. Network components can range from $150 to $750 depending on the component and the level of device. And then the end user device, which is the physical device, the operating system, basic malware protection at the operating system level, and help desk tends to run about $150 a month. So we look at a simple environment that I talked about earlier, domain controllers, file servers, maybe running an application, SQL Server, 1 firewall, 1 switch, 2 access points for Wi-Fi. You're about $3,000 per month. And here, some MSPs will charge an additional fee for each user, and you're still buying your hardware and your software, and you're still paying for those projects. Right? So it just gives a sense. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad, although I definitely will say that cloud managed services and moving to cloud first strategy will lower your cost, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So that's managed services. So now we go to managed cloud services. And we really, again, start with the managed service model, and we get the benefits of those cloud forward solutions. And the benefits really are that we're able to simplify your infrastructure with fewer on-premise components. So we eliminate the whole hardware level for a lot of what you need, and we eliminate that system management level for a lot of what you need. And that frees up resources, time, and energy to move higher up the technology stack, which also means moving closer to your business processes and the things we can change that have an impact on your business results. And so there is this shift from hardware and systems to applications, services, and security, with a lot of emphasis on security these days. Okay? And part of our model is a co-management model, which says, yes, we'll come in as a managed cloud service provider. We will provide the management, the administration, the support services, the full range of services we offer, but we don't ever disconnect you from your ability to manage your own environment or have access to your own environment, right? So it's not, avoid looking at the man behind the curtain. The curtain's open. You know what we're doing it there. And if there are things that you need or want to manage, we cooperate, we work to make that an effective solution so that you have a holistic IT service that's well managed, well run, efficient, cost effective. And so the steps when we look at our model is the way we approach managed cloud services was we start, step one is with our core services. And our basic managed cloud service, our starting point, starts with the Microsoft 365 or the Google Workplace is your productivity suite. Why? Because that provides the basic user identity for your end users. It provides your file services on both sides, both individual file services as well as administratively managed or shared file services, whether it's in Microsoft MyDrive versus SharePoint file services, or on the Google side, MyDrive versus shared drives. You've got those mechanisms in there. You've got identity management built in. You've got your messaging service, your email, calendars, contacts. You've got voice and video chat. You've got a whole range of services that come to the user that mean we no longer have to do heavy software installs on the desktops and the laptops to get the users connected. It also, by having those centralized file services, reduces, if not in most cases, eliminates the need for on-site file servers, right? You still might need on-site storage for application servers that have to be local because they connect to manufacturing hardware or distribution systems. Many businesses still need some on-premise computing on that edge, but having those the office, the back office, or the front office, if you will, file services in the cloud eliminates the need for services. And with that user identity management, we can start building out user identity and access management that doesn't require additional hardware on site. So our managed cloud service, our standard offering, includes that productivity suite sort of as the cornerstone of the architecture. We always add in advanced threat protection for email, just the nature of the world we live in with phishing attacks, etc. We want to make sure that all the data in your productivity suite has backup and recovery. Why? Because if you had an on-premise Exchange server and an on-premise file server, you would be backing up those data, hopefully to someplace locally on site for quick restore, but then also have in some shape or form going off-site for disaster recovery. And we want to make sure we have that for you as well, even though you're in the cloud. Both Microsoft and Google have co-management models for data where they make very clear in their agreements that their systems and their backup recovery tools are there to maintain the service. Protecting and managing your data, making sure it's backed up and you can recover it is your responsibility, that you need to protect from an application that corrupts a file, from overwrites, from user deletes, from deletions, accidental or intentional. And our managed cloud service also covers our premium service. And so in addition to adding and removing licenses and vendor tickets and support tickets and vendor ticket escalation services, our premium service gives you unlimited administration and management of your environment. So we'll work with whomever in your organization is responsible IT to provide those services to you, as well as end user support and services. And it's not just support when something goes wrong, it's getting the questions, well, how do I do something? How do I accomplish it? It's providing some training and some guidance on an ongoing basis so that your users and you as a company get the most out of this investment and this expenditure. To that, our core services in the managed cloud service, we include our security foundation. And this is endpoint protection, where we're protecting the devices that your people are using. DNS and web protection, because more threats are coming into companies from there. And this is an area that's often overlooked. We know that somewhere between 1 in 7 and 1 in 5 legitimate websites get hacked each year with malware that gets downloaded in the background. And it's a trusted website that you go to on a regular basis, but someone's hacked it and you can get infection there. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. We also want to manage multi-factor authentication as one of the most powerful tools against hacking and phishing attacks and security as a pro security measure, as well as helping you manage and make sure your local disk encryption is properly managed as well. Why? Because your data should be encrypted not just in motion between, when it's going over the internet from the cloud to your workstation, but on the workstations as well. Encrypt at rest, encrypt at motion, you're good. And that requirement is actually the basis of almost every single security requirement out there, whether it's PCI compliance, if you handle credit cards, or HIPAA, if you have personal health information, or the SEC and FINRA requirements, if you have financial information about individuals. All of those requirements, state encryption at rest, decryption in motion. We want to make sure that at rest piece is in place. And finally, user security awareness services. Given the nature of the world we live in, our foundation says that we should be educating your users on a non-intrusive periodic basis about security threats and what to be on the lookout for, not to impede their productivity, but have a healthy level of suspicion and concern and who to notify. Additionally, occasionally we're going to test them and see who clicks on something they shouldn't, so we can provide a nice reminder and a little bit of extra help in that process. So that's our core service, right? To that, most companies have additional security and compliance needs, and you can add them as needed. And sort of broke them down. There's many. We actually have a detailed matrix of compliance, security and compliance requirements. So we can walk that through with you and talk about your needs for business. So in the email front, it's things like, do you need archiving and discovery? Do you need, if you're HIPAA compliant, certain investment folks dealing with people's money and accounts need message level encryption? We strongly recommend data loss prevention, having some form of continuity in DR for disaster recovery. And, today more than ever, making sure that, to stop spoofing both internally and spear phishing internally against you, but also misuse of your domain by thieves against others, while ensuring the very systems being put in place to stop spam and email-based threats could reduce the deliverability of your legitimate email. Services around DKIM, DKIM, and DMARC. In the files, same question. Do you need them archived and discovery for legal, for regulatory or industry compliance? Is the information sensitive enough that file level encryption is necessary? Do you need active permissions management, where we have systems that will look at the content of a file, look at the business rules for securing it, and if there's a difference in the permission settings that for that content, those rules aren't being violated, can alert or correct. Data loss prevention here as well, and again, continuity DR, not only for your cloud systems, but for whatever systems remain on premise. Users and groups, talked about identity and access management. We can move that into the cloud. In many cases, eliminate the need for on-site directory and access management servers. Could lower your monthly operating costs, lower your capital investment, clean some additional hardware out of the closet or the computer room. We recommend folks monitor the dark web for use of and for breaches of company identifying accounts that could impact your security, and we have sessions and other resources on that you can look into. But also things like dynamic group management and permissions. So when you hire someone in a given role, we automate the onboarding and offboarding process. So when you hire them, they come in, they're given the right permissions to the right applications, to the right data sets, to the right shared files and folders. And when they're offboarded, that's removed and they're cleaned out. Devices, mobile device management, it's not just for your cell phones and your tablets. We recommend putting it on the PCs and the laptops. It gives you and us control of what's happening, lets us stop attacks, lets us recover data, lets us diagnose hardware issues, shortens the time. It's not just good security and management practice, it can shorten the time to resolve problems significantly. And again, even if everything you have is in the cloud, you might have critical devices that if the device fails, you need up and running in some form. There's business continuity solutions there. And again, into systems and applications, whether it's your SQL Server or your ERP system or your marketing tools, making sure that those are properly protected as well. Again, here's where we get into customization. Not every company needs all of these. Most companies need some. In other companies, it's a requirement. Some might, in some companies, for some companies, some of these will be a requirement, regulatory or industry, or by company policy. For others, it will be a best practice. For others, it's recommended. For others, it's a good idea. If it's not a legal or a regulatory requirement or an industry requirement, then there's always the cost benefit analysis, and we help you with that as well. Yes, ideally you would have this in place, but here's the cost. What's the gain? What's the risk? How does it work your business? Is it the right time? We can help you evaluate that and make a sound determination, come up with a solution that meets your business needs, but stays, in a way that your budget is not threatened. Step 3 is to add additional services. Probably, one of the biggest services we see interest in right now is unified communications. This isn't just voice over IP. This is bringing in and integrating communications, whether it's calling, audio, video conferencing, streaming services for videos, even the tools we use to produce this webcast, to do these webcasts. Do you need automatic call direction? Press 1 for sales, press 2 for service. Do you have a call center, or would the service desk type of features benefit how you interact with your customers? Do you need to monitor calls or archive recordings of calls? And how are users going to access your communications? Is it through the inbox? Do you want soft phones where people use their computers and their cell phones with software on it? Or do you want the more traditional voice over IP handset, a desk phone, if you will, or the conference phone? Again, we analyze your needs, we map it in, we work with multiple providers here. We want it to integrate, right? So how we integrate unified communications into the Microsoft 365 environment looks differently than the options we'll bring you in the Google Workspace environment. And finally, add those on-premise services that you need. And here, we talk about managed networks. What bandwidth do you have and need? How do people access your networks? Do you need a VPN for remote users or not to get, still get on site? But more generically, your firewall router, your switches, your Wi-Fi infrastructure, what can we do there? And I'll talk about our philosophy and simplification and savings that come into play here. Again, we can still do full remote monitoring and management services for physical servers and systems that have to stay on site. And we can offer managed print services, which is really printing, faxing, and scanning, where we manage and we can provide and manage the devices, the service of those devices, and the supplies in a way that it's a monthly fee. You don't even necessarily need to buy or rent the equipment. It can just be part of that monthly service fee, or we can mix and match what you need. The idea here is to unburden you from the administration of managing printers. Oftentimes we can consolidate and save a bunch of money there. We'll offload the management of the devices and lower the cost and sort of keep your printing service in line with your needs, given that we're moving more to a digital world together. And finally, Office. And Office is things like, particularly with people working remotely from home, it's making sure people have the right environment. So it can be sit-stand desks, it can be the right office chair, lighting, ring lighting if they're doing a lot of video conferencing, all of these other components, the right headphones or the right speaker mics to go with the laptop, whether it's a physical office at work or a home office, ensuring that your team has the right tools from a technology standpoint and an ergonomic standpoint that they can work comfortably, efficiently, in a healthy way moving forward. And so we can even add those services in as well. And again, our fee structure varies a little from the traditional MSP. As it does with most managed cloud solution providers. We start with per user, and that includes the cloud subscriptions, the user devices, and the end user services, which I mentioned earlier is more than just break-fix style support. There are also some fees because the services cover a domain. So for example, monitoring the dark web ID, it's charged per domain, not per number of user accounts you have in that domain. So it's a per domain fee on a monthly basis. And then we have as a service options, right? So here you can decide, I don't want to buy my firewall router, switches, and access points. If I buy them and I pay monthly service fees for you to monitor management. Let's roll it all in, give me one monthly fee where I don't own the hardware. You provide the hardware, you manage it, you monitor it. If something goes wrong, you replace it or fix it. We can do that as a service option. And that's becoming more popular for infrastructure as well as end user devices, in large part because it gives businesses more flexibility to scale up and down as their business and the economy continues to shift. And then clearly, if you have legacy style infrastructure and services, we have the traditional style of fees for those. And so there's some advantages to this model and to the fee structure. And the first really starts with leveraging the fact that we're using cloud and there's a process of simplification here, right? So as I mentioned earlier, ideally we have very few or no on-premise servers and systems, right? And that eliminates from that fee structure, right? So, we see companies that still keep on-premise file servers, for example. And because of that, they need Active Directory servers. So now they have 3 boxes sitting on site, even though they're using Microsoft 365 and they have access to web, cloud file services and their emails in the cloud, right? And so they're paying for Microsoft 365 and the licenses and the support around that, but they're still paying the monthly fees on those 3 servers. If we can eliminate those servers, when we can eliminate those services that they're providing are still provided within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem you're already paying for. All we're doing is eliminating the cost of monitoring and managing 3 pieces of iron and hardware sitting in the closet, right? So simplification reduces the number of things that a managed service provider would charge for. Additionally, we focus on appropriate infrastructure. And here, because managed service providers had to build network infrastructure that supported a very different style of physical security than is needed today, and a larger number of physical devices, and they're limiting their options. Typically, managed service providers, particularly when their customers are very small businesses or small and mid-sized businesses, because they've limited their options on the type of network hardware they put in, for example, tend to be more capability and therefore more cost than their customers generally need. And so we talk about appropriate infrastructure, we talk about right sizing the capabilities and costs of firewalls and routers, switches, and access points. And in doing so, we can put in a managed network infrastructure, for example, with or without you buying the hardware. We can roll it into monthly cost, or you can buy the hardware and cover and just monthly go monthly on the services. That's a lower CapEx and or operating expense than you currently have today. And so with those simplification and right sizing of technologies and services comes fee savings. The other thing we're able to do with cloud is we're able to migrate in, which means transitioning major services as those contracts expire. So you may have a 6-year-old phone system on premise or even hosted somewhere, and there's a service contract that goes with that phone system. And those service contracts can be expensive. So we understand how you don't want, when we come in day one, say, hey, let's get you off of this and into unified communications that's really well integrated. You might say, whoa, that's fine. Tell us when your service contracts end. We'll map the project to migrate into unified communication services as you look to retire that hardware or as those service contracts end. So we understand sunk cost and avoiding that as well as phasing projects to get in. And again, it's flexibility of the model in leveraging cloud, as well as ways to manage the total cost to you through our fee structure. The third advantage is really our co-management model, right? So yes, we will do all of the heavy lifting in running your IT environment for you. It can be 100% outsourced. You still maintain full access to your systems and service administration, right? And so there are times when we work with clients where they're like, gee, you do everything except we have this custom business application that comes from a different vendor, and we, with that vendor, are going to manage that part of our environment. Excellent. Have at it. Let us know if and when we can help. We'll manage everything else. And so we tune our coverage and what you need from us to your needs, which again gives us flexibility and you flexibility. And then the last thing is, it's really about the things, right? Still, many of our customers are most comfortable buying their laptops, but more and more companies we work with are very comfortable saying, you know what, give me, here are the 5 roles that use laptops. Give me we'll come up with a recommended configuration. When I need one for that, I'll let you know. Add it to the service, right? We acquire the laptop, it gets added to your monthly fee. If it's a new hire, we obviously increment the user accounts and all the per user services. That's fine. You have a set amount per person now, per human, that becomes a variable cost with the number of employees, and the hardware component is part of it. Similarly, right now, we're actually working with a couple of customers who still have on-premise systems. They need a better business continuity disaster recovery solution, but they expect within a 3-year window that those systems will be moved into the cloud, right? So rather than invest in hardware that is going to depreciate over 5 years, or at least 3, well, most likely 5 years of servers, right? We're proposing a solution that says, here's a service that does your offsite backup, your business continuity solution, where you never own the hardware. The hardware is just part of the monthly fee. When you move those systems up and you no longer need those services, that hardware gets shipped back to us, right? And you're off the hook. And so that type of as a service offers a lot of flexibility and can really work towards both capital and expense budgets. So I've covered a lot of ground. And so if folks have any questions, please let me know in that questions window. But now here's the Contact Us action slide. And really what we want to talk about with next steps is, assess your current situation, right? Are you happy with your IT services? Are you getting value? Do you know for certain that you're not double paying for services from multiple providers that are redundant? How much time and efficiency are you losing because you're controlling things yourself? Are you far enough into the cloud that's for what's best for your business? Maybe you're too far, and you need to rethink it. Have you been in the cloud and wondering if your initial choice, whether it was Microsoft or Google, is the right one, and you should be looking at a different platform? All of these questions come into play. So, think about that, do the assessment, and contact us. We can help you walk you through that. We can help you explore alternatives and give you options and map out an architecture and a phased approach to get there in a way that improves efficiency for your business. And again, we believe that IT decisions should be driven by your desired business results. And so talk to us about your business, where you want it to go, how you want it to get there. We'll talk about how IT and our services can help you get there and what's required to do that. And then you can make decisions on where and when and how you want to invest. And so the best way to contact us is on the screen. Contact us as a company, info@cumulusglobal.com, or the phone number's up on the screen, or feel free to contact me directly. My email address is on the screen, afalcon@cumulusglobal.com. My phone number's there too. I'll tell you, I'm bad at answering the phone and I'm worse at answering voicemail. So the best way to reach me is by email. I don't have an assistant, so the email is going to come to my inbox and I'll be the one to respond. I might loop in one of my team members who can help answer your questions and move things forward. And so at this point, as I wait for any questions that come in, I want to thank everyone for joining us here today and live, as well as those who are watching this on demand. Appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully you found the session informative and useful, and please let me know if we can help in any way. At this point, I'll say farewell to those folks on demand, pause the recording, and come back and answer any questions that the live audience may have. Thank you.